The time, 1951. The place, Point Saint-Esprit, France. The peaceful village of Point Saint-Esprit are living their lives, working on farms, spending time with their loved ones, and not expecting anything will interrupt the silence. But something will. A weird illness has arrived in town, illness that quickly spreads throughout the entire area, affecting more than 250 people. As doctors and officials scramble to contain the outbreak, it becomes clear that the illness is caused by contaminated bread infected by the ergo fungus. But how is this possible? Why is something like this coming to the quiet village of Point Saint-Esprit? The answer comes from an interesting place where one of the bakeries says, "Guys, listen, there's definitely something wrong with this flour. I think it's contaminated." Then, the situation in the village becomes even more chaotic as more and more people become sick. But it's not just illness, it's something more sinister. The people in town have become crazed. People start hallucinating things. A man jumps from a second-story window believing he's an airplane and dies on impact. An 11-year-old boy attempts to strangle his own mother, his behavior becoming increasingly violent and erratic. Something took over these people of this village in a way that was unheard of elsewhere. More than 50 people are interned at a local asylum, displaying symptoms similar to those caused by LSD-induced hallucinations. Thankfully, in the end, the outbreak was contained, but the town was left reeling from the devastation caused by the illness. Doctors later dubbed it the Nuit d'Apocalypse, or apocalyptic night, due to the strange and violent behavior exhibited by those affected by the contaminated bread. Now, if you're an avid watcher of this channel, you probably know where this is going, with one of HBO's newest shows, The Last of Us. In the show, humanity is threatened by a deadly fungus that turns people into violent and aggressive creatures, or some might even call them zombies. But the thing is, maybe it's not only in this show. Maybe this post-apocalyptic world is something humanity has already experienced in some ways, but no one has spoken about. Or maybe it's on the horizon. So, could The Last of Us happen in real life? Is the fungi pandemic possible? And most importantly, what is the infection in The Last of Us based on? Pure imagination of the game creators or something else? We'll try to answer some of these questions in this episode, but before we dig into it, first, let us know in the comments below what you think the right answer is. Alright, put in your answer. Let's see if you were right. The video game and HBO series The Last of Us depicts the challenges faced by humans as they try to survive in a world where a contagious fungus transforms regular individuals into zombies. Interestingly, the creators of the franchise drew inspiration from a genuine species of fungus that exhibits a form of mind control over its insect's hosts. Now, it's important that I said insect and not humans or mammals, but we'll get into that in a bit. The cordyceps, or a zombie ant fungus, scientifically known as Orthocordyceps unilateralis, is a type of fungi that infects insects, particularly ants and spiders. As with other parasites, cordyceps consume all of the nutrients of its host before replacing its body with spores that will allow the fungus to multiply. It then manipulates the insect into climbing to a high location where it eventually releases the spores, infecting other insects in close proximity. According to Bryn Dentinker, a biology professor at the University of Utah and curator of mycology at the Natural History Museum of Utah, the cordyceps fungus is among the most well-known and frequently encountered organisms that possess the ability to control the minds of their hosts. In Dentinker's words, there seems to be some combination of physical manipulation of muscle fibers, for example, possibly grow into the brain itself, that can impact its behavior. But there's also very likely some sort of chemical attack on the host, either small molecules or proteins, or some other thing that ends up manipulating brain's behavior. Listen, humans are not unfamiliar with mind-altering substances that are caused by fungus. LSD, for example, is a potent hallucinogenic drug that is synthesized from a chemical compound found in fungus called ergo. Ergo grows on certain grains, such as rye, and can contaminate these crops. The fungus produces a variety of alkaloids, including ergomine, which can be chemically modified to produce LSD. Although LSD when consumed in smaller doses causes hallucinations and feelings of grandeur, the effects disappear after a few hours, and they don't have the power to overtake someone's mind from a single dose. I'm sure if you asked the Beatles back in the day when they were writing the song Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, Afterwards, they probably came back to their senses and they were able to write plenty of other good music. But back to LSD. People report that LSD can cause changes in perception, thinking, emotions, and spiritual experiences. It can make time feel distorted, cause physical sensations, and have long-lasting effects on mental health. And the fact that LSD can affect certain parts of the brain supports the basic premise that fungus cannot infect humans, mostly due to the fact that our body temperatures are high enough that most organisms can't survive, and their proteins would denature at that temperature, so overall they couldn't survive in our bodies. But in the series, and more correctly, the video game, the show walks between the lines in this sense. This is addressed in The Last of Us, with scientists in the opening scene stating that global temperatures are rising, which, by the way, is something also happening in the real world, and in which a new species of fungi will grow and will know how to adapt to the new heat conditions, and subsequently to the bodies of mammals, which are far above the average degrees of insects and objects. But before we go any deeper, The Last of Us isn't the only piece of media that has posed this question. There have been a lot of movies and TV shows from the past that explore what a real-life zombie apocalypse would look like. In 2016, The Girl with All the Gifts was a movie that covered something very similar, with a fungal infection turning most of the human population into quote-unquote hungries or cannibalistic creatures. We also see references to sentient fungi in Star Trek, Discovery, and even in the X-Files. Additionally, we could see that sci-fi writers in the early 1950s were even thinking about how nature could infect the minds of humans.
That unless something is done and done quickly, man as the dominant species of life on Earth will be extinct within a year.
Take the classic 1956 film Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which depicts a world that is slowly being taken over by alien plants. Even though in the Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the plants do turn out to be out of this world, and the entire story is actually just an allegory for people's suspicions of communism during the Cold War, the film still frames the villain as being from nature. And of course, if we're going to talk about plants killing humans, I have to mention M. Night Shyamalan's The Happening, where although nature is not turning people into zombies, it is attacking their psyche of every human on Earth, making them want to end their lives. But back to the big question. Is there a chance plants or fungi could actually infect human minds like in these TV shows and movies? Well, in an article published in Scientific American magazine, this question is pretty much addressed. The interviewer speaks with Tom Chiller, who is the chief of the Mycotic Diseases branch at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and asks if the zombie ant fungi could one day also infect humans. He asks it like this. You mentioned the changing climate could play a role in pressuring these fungi to survive in new places. That's actually one of the implied causes of the pandemic in The Last of Us. How often do we see this in real life? Chiller responds by saying most fungi that we deal with are in the environment, and they are highly sensitive to environmental change. Any warming, cooling, or changes in general, fungi are going to be affected by them. The interviewer then asks, could they adapt to infect new kinds of hosts? And Chiller answers, there's no question, we see this now. We saw this with C. auris in humans, and there's the fungal white nose syndrome that's wiping out hibernating bats in the US. Wait, let's pause for a second about talking about the interview. Did that guy just say that there's another fungus that we need to be on the lookout for? He did, and let's talk about it. C. auris stands for Candida auris, which is a type of fungus that can cause serious and sometimes deadly infections. Candida auris was first identified in 2009 in Japan and has since been reported in more than 30 countries around the world. The Japanese researchers who discovered Candida auris were able to identify it using a genetic sequencing technique. They found that it was a type of Candida fungus that had not been previously identified. Keep in mind, I'm not talking about the show anymore. This is straight up real life that we have a fungus that can affect humans in this way. After the initial discovery in Japan, cases of Candida auris were reported in other countries, including the United Kingdom, South Africa, and the United States. It became clear that Candida auris was a global health concern due to its ability to cause serious infections and its resistance to multiple types of antifungal drugs. Candida auris is a fungus that is difficult to treat because it's often resistant to multiple types of antifungal drugs. It can cause various types of infections and is particularly dangerous for people who are already sick and has weakened immune systems or have been in healthcare facilities for a long time. Candida auris can easily spread in healthcare facilities, survive on the surfaces for a long time, and is resistant to standard disinfectant methods. We know how hectic healthcare facilities can be when pandemics and epidemics hit. Just think about what just happened in 2020. So it wouldn't be unreasonable to say that there is a chance it could be too overwhelming for the current system. Now, with all that being said, it doesn't really look like there's a fungi or bacteria that's currently able to take control of our minds like in The Last of Us. But as the great Socrates says, the only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. That's it for this episode. Let us know in the comments what you would do in the event of a zombie apocalypse. Would you act more like Joel or Ellie? Please don't forget to subscribe, and we hope to see you in the next video.